Hello, I'm Ellen Binns, coming today from Wheaton, Illinois, in the USA. Welcome to Impact, a podcast about how we can each bring about real change in the world and getting practical in making that happen.
And hello, I'm Clive Johnson, coming today from Leigh-on-Sea in the UK. A special welcome if you're listening for the first time, and a big thank you to our new subscribers. Each week, we look at one aspect of how we can connect our hearts to offer healing for others with our collective intention, prayers, and meditation, and go behind the headlines of a critical happening in our world that needs our attention right now.
In today's episode, we take one of these regular deep dives to more fully understand and tune in with something many of us may know only a little about, and see where we might hone in with our prayers and intentions. And as we record, it's July 9th, 2025. So as we record, this coming Friday, the 11th of July, marks the 30th anniversary since one of the most appalling acts of genocide the world has witnessed since the Holocaust of the Second World War, the appalling massacre of innocent civilians at Srebrenica, which occurred at the height of the war in the Balkans or former Yugoslavia during the mid-1990s. Today, we look back at what happened and why, and how the effects of the atrocity are being felt today. We invite you to join us in a period of silent remembrance, and also to see where our intentions and prayers may be needed now. We should give you a warning before going further. Some of what we will talk about will be very distressing for some listeners. We urge those who can stay with us to hold intention, even if what we hear may be very upsetting. Of course, sometimes when we are moved in this way, it may help us to connect all the more with the people we are offering our prayers and intentions for.
So what happened at Srebrenica during the Balkan War, and why is it so significant in the history of genocide? So in July 1995, during the Bosnian War, the town of Srebrenica in eastern Bosnia and Herzegovina became the site of a systematic massacre. More than 8,000 Bosniak, that is Bosnian Muslim men and boys, were executed over several days. We spoke just now that this was genocide that occurred on European soil since the Second World War, and in many ways there are chilling comparisons with what happened to minority groups, especially the Jews, of course, during the period of the Nazis. Here it was a Muslim population that was being targeted by Serbian Bosnian nationals who predominantly were of Eastern Orthodox Christian faith. So whilst it wasn't a religious war as such, the Bosnian Serbs saw that national identity was very closely aligned with their religion, and they wanted essentially to eradicate this group of Muslims who were quite concentrated. It was quite an enclave of Bosnians in the town of Srebrenica. Women, children, and the elderly were forcibly deported, with over 20,000 civilians being expelled in a campaign of ethnic cleansing. The killings were carried out by Bosnian Serb forces led by General Ratko Mladic, with support from the Army of Republika Srpska and Serb paramilitary units. Srebrenica had been declared a safe area by the United Nations in 1993 and was under the protection of Dutch peacekeepers. However, the peacekeepers were outnumbered and unable to prevent the town's capture and the subsequent massacre. Bosnian Serb forces began their offensive on July 6, 1995. By the 11th of July, Srebrenica had fallen. Thousands of Bosniak men attempted to flee through forests, while others sought refuge at the UN base at Potokari. Men and boys were separated from women and children, detained and systematically executed at various sites, including warehouses, schools, and fields. Victims were buried in mass graves, and efforts were made to conceal the crimes by reburying the bodies in secondary graves.
Srebrenica is very significant in the history of genocide, being recognized as the worst atrocity on European soil since the Holocaust, as we said, and being ruled by both the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the ICTY, and the International Court of Justice as crimes that meet the tight criteria for genocide, the only event during the Bosnian War to be legally classified as such. The massacre has set important legal precedents. The senior Bosnian Serb leaders, including Ratko Mladic and Radovan Karadzic, being convicted of genocide and crimes against humanity, and the Dutch state being found liable for failing to protect some of the victims, establishing that countries contributing troops to UN peacekeeping missions can be held legally responsible
Mm.
for their actions or inactions. Considering the international response to what happened in the war more generally, the massacre exposed the failures of the international community and the UN to protect civilians, leading to critical self-examination and reforms in peacekeeping and humanitarian intervention.
Very significant in that respect, wasn't it? The Dutch were held
Yeah.
responsible as the peacekeepers.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, when I read that, I was like, what the heck?
Mm.
I love the Dutch, but come on, that's, what happened?
I think part of the problem was they were heavily outnumbered.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, they were heavily outnumbered, and I think this happened by surprise, of course. But yes,
absolutely.
but yes,
Absolutely.
clearly, clearly they had a case to answer. So, what actually happened to the perpetrators of the Srebrenica massacre following the war? Key leaders were prosecuted, as we said, among them the former Bosnian Serb military commander Ratko Mladic, who was convicted by the ICTY of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity for his role, and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Radovan Karadzic, the former political leader of the Bosnian Serbs, was found guilty of the same crimes and is now also serving a whole life prison term. In total, the ICTY indicted 161 individuals for crimes committed during the Yugoslav wars, with at least 14 people convicted specifically in relation to the Srebrenica killings. These included military officers, police commanders, and others directly involved in the planning and execution of the massacre. Some of these pleaded guilty to participating in the killings and provided testimony against other perpetrators. That was critical, I would imagine, in bringing others to justice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
While many high-profile leaders and perpetrators have been prosecuted, thousands of cases related to war crimes and enforced disappearances from the war remain unresolved. Many who perpetrated these crimes have not been brought to justice, and efforts continue in Bosnia and Herzegovina and internationally to address these outstanding cases.
So, what are the long term consequences for the victims of the massacre that are still being felt today? The massacre left deep, enduring scars in Bosnia and Herzegovina and remains a powerful reminder of the importance of confronting genocide denial and promoting justice for victims. Many survivors and their families continue to suffer from severe post traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, and survivor's guilt. These psychological wounds are often compounded by the ongoing denial of the genocide by some political leaders, making healing and reconciliation even more difficult. The trauma has not been limited to direct survivors. Psychologists report that the effects have been passed down to younger generations, including children born after the war, who experience emotional and psychological consequences from the unresolved grief and loss in the families. At the same time, grief remains unresolved for many families who are still searching for the remains of loved ones, as thousands of victims remain missing.
This is striking, isn't it? 30 years after,
Yeah.
this trauma is still
But
being
it's
felt.
understandable, that these people are living in fears still if that happened that fast. And we're not even talking about what they talk about with DNA and
No.
how we hold that trauma in our bodies.
Exactly. The massacre and subsequent ethnic cleansing led to the destruction of entire families and communities. Many survivors were displaced, and some lineages were completely wiped out, leaving no one to even report missing persons. The legacy of the massacre has also contributed to persistent ethnic divisions in Bosnia and Herzegovina, with the country remaining divided along ethnic lines, and with political and social tensions still being fueled by denial and revisionism regarding the events that occurred in Srebrenica 30 years ago. The lack of acknowledgement and justice for the crimes committed continues to hinder reconciliation efforts. Many perpetrators remain at large or live in the same communities as survivors. Imagine that.
Mm.
Deepening mistrust and fear. Many families are still waiting for justice and explanations. The slow pace of investigations and prosecutions, as well as the lack of full implementation of law supporting victims, has left many feeling abandoned by the authorities. And I'm sure many will have passed on, of course, not seeing justice done, as it were.
Right, that's what I was thinking,
Mm,
just kind of waiting it out.
yeah.
Yeah. Today, 30 years on, many survivors of the massacre remain displaced from their homes, unable or unwilling to return to their former homes due to lingering fear, lack of resources, or destroyed property. These long term consequences of the Srebrenica massacre may not be unique, reminding us of the deeply felt impacts on the psychological health of survivors, the social fabric of communities, ongoing ethnic division, delayed justice, and the persistent search for closure that often persists for decades after a genocide. These are effects that continue to shape the lives of victims of such atrocities and their descendants today.
Mm. So perhaps a
And
question we don't really need to answer. Need to ask, perhaps, it might be an obvious answer, but considering this, why is it important to remember what happened at Srebrenica? Very important. We do remember what happened for several reasons. At an individual level, but also as societies through our collective memory and the keeping alive of this memory by the media and those in the public eye. Remembering Srebrenica ensures that the facts of the genocide are preserved and not distorted or denied by those seeking to minimize or justify the atrocity. Commemoration also pays respect to the victims and acknowledges the suffering of survivors and their families, as we've said, many of whom are still searching for justice and closure. It might well, too, that this memory will allow there to be learning from the failure of the international community and the United Nations to act in protecting citizens from genocide. As former UN Secretary General, probably one of my favorite Secretary Generals, Kofi Annan stated, "The tragedy of Srebrenica will forever haunt the history of the United Nations." Remembering Srebrenica is then not only about the past, it is a commitment to vigilance, justice, and humanity in the present and future. Srebrenica is a powerful lesson on the dangers of hatred, ethnic nationalism, and unchecked power. Acknowledging the truth of what happened will be essential for reconciliation among Bosnia's ethnic groups and for building a peaceful, inclusive society. Forgetting or denying the genocide may only deepen divisions and hinder healing.
so, what is the purpose of remembering Srebrenica Day and what will happen on this day? July 11th is now observed as the International Day of Reflection and Commemoration of the Srebrenica genocide, emphasizing the need to remember and educate to prevent future genocides. The day serves to commemorate the genocide, pay tribute to those who lost their lives, and those who continue to live with the trauma and loss, raising awareness about the dangers of hatred, racism, and intolerance, ensuring that the lessons of Srebrenica are not forgotten, and helping to prevent future atrocities, and encouraging communities to stand together against all forms of hatred, discrimination, and prejudice, fostering interfaith understanding and social cohesion. We can use that all over the world, right?
Mm,
The theme of the day this year, Remember Yesterday, Act Today, emphasizes the need for reflective remembrance and proactive efforts to combat intolerance and build safer, more inclusive societies. While the main international ceremonies marking the day will take place in Bosnia and Herzegovina itself, hundreds of memorial events and activities will be held in many countries, including special services, educational assemblies, art exhibitions, and testimonies from survivors. Faith and interfaith communities will hold moments of silence and shared prayers, and schools will participate through assemblies and educational programs, sometimes receiving Srebrenica flowers crafted by survivor groups and engaging in discussions about the importance of remembrance and standing against hate.
mm,
So maybe our listeners can search out in their communities and see if anything is happening around them, or make
Exactly.
something happen, or at
Exactly.
least speak about it, right? On July 11th.
Definitely. There will be things online. I myself am dedicating my meditation and intention focus in Insight Timer on the 11th to remembering Srebrenica. So
Wonderful.
that's another opportunity
Right.
to go online and stand with others in remembering. So where might we hone in with our intentions and prayers? So this is the point where we invite you to come to a safe place where you can be very present. So if you're driving at the moment, for example, maybe wanting to bookmark this point and come back later, as we suggest some areas that we might hold together as a focus for our intention and prayers. So becoming very still and connected as we turn our attention in our own way to holding the many affected by this appalling day. We pray that acknowledging the truth of what happened will be essential for reconciliation among Bosnia's ethnic groups and for building a peaceful, inclusive society. We ask that there will not be any parent, caregiver, or teacher in Bosnia and Serbia who chooses to forget or deny the genocide and so reduce the opportunity for healing.
We will that the many events that take place on Remembering Srebrenica Day will move many hearts to recognize the need to remember and educate others of the horrors of genocide, with a will to prevent future genocides.
We ask that media coverage of the anniversary of the Srebrenica massacre will raise widespread awareness about the dangers of hatred, racism, and intolerance, ensuring that the lessons of Srebrenica are not forgotten, but may encourage communities today to stand together against all forms of hatred, discrimination, and prejudice, and to foster interfaith understanding and social cohesion. We ask that there will be an awakening to where hatred and discrimination may loom large in the politics and polarities of our own countries, and a widespread will to resist this danger.
We will that the lessons of the Srebrenica atrocity will be learned and heeded, that the international community will fully observe the rulings of courts to be vigilant and proactive in instances where alleged genocide may be occurring in the world today.
We will that the participants in the massacre who remain alive and who have not yet been brought to justice will be located and fairly tried.
We ask that those sentenced for their part in the massacre will serve as a warning to others who may contemplate such atrocities, including those who are currently engaged in bitter wars where oppression of ethnic groups is occurring.
We will that communities and relevant authorities will be moved to continue to support the many victims of the massacre who remain alive, some of whom feel abandoned by the authorities.
Now, let us take a moment of silence to remember those who lost their lives and those who continue to live with the trauma and loss caused by genocide.
And our suggested intention focus for this week, as the world marks 30 years since the massacre at Srebrenica, we suggest holding as our main intention, we will that the unchecked nationalism, ethnic hatred, and consequences of international inaction that allowed Srebrenica to happen will never be repeated. Please join us in holding this.
That about wraps it up for this episode. Remember, you can connect with us in the Facebook group and for live intention holding in Clive's daily Insight Timer offerings, and with me in the Labyrinth Activist Network's Zoom calls. Details of how to hook up with these are in our show notes. Look out, too, for our next special topic episode, which we'll be releasing in the next few days. Thank you for listening and for sharing with us and holding intentions. We look forward to connecting again next time. And in the meantime,
thank you, go well, stay safe.
And remember, we're more powerful together.
Impact is presented by Ellen Bintz and Clive Johnson and produced by Impact Productions. Our theme music is by Chris Collins and our logo artwork is by Auto Classic. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, or your favorite podcast provider. We're a non-commercial podcast dedicated to people of any faith tradition or none who yearn for healing in our troubled world. Please pass on the word so others may join us in making an impact. Thank you for listening.